everyone, welcome back to the Library of Parthos. My name is Sarah, and today I have a book that I surprisingly enjoyed more than I thought I would, and that is Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. So as you can see by the cover, this was a buy one get one half off at Barnes & Noble maybe like a year ago, and I had already read something that she had written and I thought, sure, I'll give this a shot. And I'm so glad I did because I really enjoyed it. It is an urban fantasy, Gothic, horror, all kind of mixed into one, I guess. Urban fantasy just isn't something that I've read a lot of, so it's not something that I seek out normally, so I didn't have super high expectations for how much I would enjoy this story, but I ended up really loving it. So about 2 years ago, I think, I read the book Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and it was a period where I had not really found books that I was enjoying. When I did like my undergrad, then I took a year off, went right into grad school, and did like a couple of certifications, got my master's, and so I spent a really long time in school, and I kind of felt burnt out, you know, like I had read a lot of scholarly articles and a lot of research, and I didn't really feel like I wanted to read in my spare time anymore, and that made me really sad because as a kid I loved to read so much. So I finally decided I'm gonna try to get back into it. I'm gonna find something that I really enjoy and I'm gonna reignite this love of reading. And through watching booktube videos and podcasts and all of that stuff, I decided to pick up the book Mexican Gothic. Not really something that's in a preferred genre for me. I don't really do horror or those Gothic thrillers. However, the pacing of the book, the way the characters were developed, it did what I needed it to do, and I was reinterested in reading, and that led to me discovering more books that I loved, and now here we are. So thank you, I guess, to Silvia Moreno-Garcia for writing an intriguing story that really reignited that spark for me. Similar kind of style with this book. I was really impressed with how the main characters were developed, how fast-paced the story was. I have a couple small criticisms which I will share with you. The vibe that I kind of got from this book, maybe this isn't the best way to describe it. It was kind of like What We Do in the Shadows meets Death Note. And I don't know if that's the best comparison to make, but let me explain why I'm making that comparison. So this is a story about a vampire who was involved in this kind of vampire mafia event that happened where a lot of her family were killed, and so she's now on the run in Mexico City. And throughout the beginning of the story, you learn a little bit of the history of the vampires, and it's very complex and not quite like any sort of vampire lore that I've read before. So there are a bunch of different types of vampires. They each take, I don't even want to say that they suck blood because that's not what all of them do, but they each have a specific thing that they take, and they have different means for taking that. Now, I'll explain that a little bit more. But so she is a hummingbird style vampire. So she has like a long tubey tongue that sticks out, and she gets blood that way. There are the revenants, which just kind of like suck your life force right out of you. There are the necros, which just kind of like almost eat like human flesh and blood. So there are a bunch of different types of vampires, and they have the option to have a familiar as well, which in this book they are called Renfields. So that's where I get the What We Do in the Shadows comparison, because there are different types of vampires and they have familiars. And the main characters in the story are a vampire and a familiar, or a Renfield, where the Death Note comparison comes in. No, there is not an actual Death Note or anything close to a Death Note in this story. What I think kind of reminded me of Death Note so much was just the relationship between the characters and like the police. So vampires are not welcome in Mexico City. They can potentially be killed if they are found by the cops, and there's the sanitation department who is out looking for them regularly. So one of the characters, her name is Anna, she is a detective who has been tasked with finding the main character for a variety of groups. First, it's because she's a suspect in this murder case. Then it becomes the bribery was involved and a gang is looking for her and another gang is looking for her, and just complex relationships with the police. And so that was kind of what led me to think of Death Note and like that, just like that dark vibe. I'm sure there's a better comparison that could be made, but that's the one that I thought of. So I've kind of given a few details of the plot so far without hopefully giving too much away. So just a very quick, like, brief overview. The main character's name is Adele, and she is a vampire in Mexico City. Her family was murdered by a rival gang. They are seeking to kill her as well, so she is on the run in Mexico City. Because she's a vampire, she doesn't have the required documents that she needs to be able to get out of Mexico City. So her purpose while she's there is to be able to get some forged ID so that she can get out of Mexico City to a place that is safer. While she's there, she meets a garbage collector named Domingo, and he becomes her Renfield, or her familiar. So getting into some potential spoilers and my thoughts on the story. As I mentioned earlier, it was a very fast paced, which I appreciated. It made it an easy read. It was very quick to get through. The main characters were very well developed. I quickly got attached to Adele and Domingo. I feel like we got a lot of their backstory. This book was written from multiple points of view, so we do get to see the story from both Adele and Domingo's perspective, and I think that really added a lot to the story. Domingo very much reminds me of Guillermo and his like obsession with vampires. He thinks he knows a lot about them, or he knows a lot about vampires, like that we would think of vampires, but with the specialized vampires in the story, he doesn't know quite as much as he thinks he does. So he and Adele quickly form a relationship as he is trying to help her get out of Mexico City, and of course she says that he can come with her as well. There is a very short-lived romance in this story. The side characters, however, I feel like they weren't quite as involved as I expected them to be. I don't know if this is necessarily a criticism or my expectations were just different than how the author developed the story. Earlier I mentioned the detective, Anna. I feel like her potential to be involved was a lot greater than what actually happened. So she was investigating Adele because there was a murder that Adele did not commit, but it was somebody who was looking for her. She then gets bribed by a rival gang in the city to find Adele, and she accepts the bribe because she wants her daughter to be able to get out of Mexico City. She is then kind of brainwashed by a necros named Nick. So the necros are the ones that like eat like human flesh in addition to like the blood, but they can also kind of turn you into like a human puppet. So as he is searching for Adele, his family was the one that killed her family, he ends up finding Anna and turning her into like his little puppet. I felt like we were reaching this climax with all of these characters. Like the rising action didn't quite get there as much as I thought it would. Anna's story was over very quickly. She tries to interfere and Nick has her turn the gun on herself and she dies. And we don't get any closure with like what happens to her daughter, anything like that. It's just over. Same thing with Nick and the necros that are chasing Adele. They're just kind of killed and that's it. And that one I think makes a little more sense to me because if there was to be any more action involving that gang, it probably would have led to a lot longer story. So that one I kind of get, but I wish we would have got a little more closure for Anna's story. As I said, there is romance in the story, but it's a very short-lived, close to like the last, I don't even know, the last like third, the last quarter of the book. Adele and Domingo do begin a relationship. However, she's very aware of their differences. He is human, she is a vampire, typical long life thing still exists. So she is very aware of the fact that she, first of all, is still on the run, even though this rival gang, at least for the foreseeable future, has been taken care of. She knows she's going to continue to be on the run. She heals very quickly. Like, if she breaks a bone, it will, you know, reform back together. She lost a hand at one point, it grew back. So like, her lack of mortality, in contrast to Domingo being just a human, she starts to realize that maybe this relationship isn't the best idea. And so when she finally makes it out of Mexico City, she asks him to stay behind, and he does. And like, I think they both understand why, but it was just very, very short-lived in this story. One of the things that I was really intrigued by was just the whole world in this story. So it takes place in Mexico City, but it's almost like a futuristic Mexico City. You can have dogs that have been like cyber genetically enhanced or something. Like, if you see on the picture, there's like a Doberman with like a glowing tattoo. That's basically what the dog is described as in the story. And there are all of these like ways that people are identified to make sure they're not vampires. Domingo's job really intrigues me too, if you could call it a job. He's a trash collector. So he goes to the landfills and he collects trash and sells it. And he works occasionally for a rag and bone man. So just that very like dystopian kind of feel to the city. You know, it didn't really seem like there was a lot of hope for the direction the city was going. And I thought it was just a really intriguing world that the author created. So overall, I really enjoyed the book. I will definitely be reading more of her books in the future. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon.